What we want to talk about is the neck angle itself and how to use our jig so that you get a right angle for the guitar. And the whole purpose is to make sure that when you have your fingerboard on and it's fretted and you have your bridge on and you put your saddle in, is that when you string it up, that your saddle is only sticking out about 3/32. And we'll take a look at how to achieve that with our neck angle jig. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we set up the neck angle jig itself. There are 2 pins here that we use for the truss rod slot, and then we make a T-shaped piece of wood, preferably with a high grain of plywood, as many layers you can get. And then we put a very accurate line down the middle, and then you can either use holes or you can make a slot. And that's how we're going to line up this dial indicator. I would also suggest putting a mark here where the saddle of your guitar will be, because we really want that point to be on the center of the saddle. So we'll go ahead and put this in. Line it up, just like that. And the thing we do is we loosen this screw here so that we can move this back and forth until it's centered. And once it's centered, we look at the dial indicator and we take this, we rotate it until you hit 0. So now it's on 0. We also make note where the small indicator is, and in this case it's between 0.1 and 0.2. So once we have that, then we basically zeroed up the jig. Now the idea behind the neck angle is actually twofold. Number one, we actually want to have the neck angle itself, and the other one is the joint to make this all work. What we really want to do is project this surface right here to that point. Now you got a hump right here, so we really can't put a straight edge in because it will actually rest on this hump. So what we do with the neck jig is we actually have the dial indicator, so we actually not have to deal with that, so that when we project the straight line, it's absolutely flat. So that's what we'll be doing next. We will go ahead and put the edge vise on the guitar. It's very important that this surface is absolutely flat. If not, make sure that you sand it flat. Otherwise, this thing will rock back and forth, and we don't want that. So we'll go ahead and put the template guide in there, and we want to make sure that the line is facing down, and then the guitar itself will have a center line for you to use for lining that up, and I don't know if you can see that. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we already cut the joint out, so we're just going to have to pretend that that line is there. So once you have that in there, you push this down, and you make sure that it's totally secured. You don't have to over-tighten the edge vise to the guitar itself, making sure this is absolutely flat. And then we'll go ahead and take the template out. We have the edge vise on the guitar. Now we'll take the guitar itself, and with indexing points, we will place that, scooting it this way, on the indexing point, making sure this is absolutely tight. Then we'll go ahead, and there's a center line here, and there's 2 screws right here. You can actually move this back and forth so that it's absolutely centered. Then we'll go ahead and center that, And you don't have to tighten this, just snug so that this doesn't move. And with this knob below here, we will watch the gauge and we'll rotate that very accurately till it's 0. And once you have 0, there are 2 tightening thumb screws and you lock it in on both sides. That way. Okay. So in virtually this plate now, that surface, that straight line is projected to that point. Now does that mean that we're ready for us to cut this? It does not, because now we have to compensate for the fingerboard frets, and we also have to compensate for the bridge height. And once you have that done, then you can unlock this. Okay, and let's say that you have to compensate 1/8 of an inch. You could take the dial indicator and you can move it 0.125, just like that, very, very accurately. We do not use angle as a reference point. We use actual distance with the dial indicator. And once you're done, then you can set this and you can cut. But what I tend to do first is make sure that before we go ahead and do that, let's go back to the 0 point. Okay? And we take this off and we use this reference with your neck, I don't know if you can see it, to make sure that is a straight line to that point. Okay? If you're going to make any kind of adjustments, this is the time to do it because you have not cut into the guitar itself. If you're comfortable with your setting and you're ready to go, remember you set the height. We can go ahead and put the dovetail jig in here if it's a dovetail. And we have to hold the guitar in place, and then we could take the router that I recommend with the dovetail bit and we can cut it. Now what I suggest is these templates are designed between the large and small so that the bit that's sticking out is 1 inch. It's very difficult to move this up and down and try to maintain accuracy. So we suggest just go ahead, leave it 1 inch and don't touch it. And then we can go ahead and route out your dovetail joint. So we'll take the router and we'll place it on this jig like so. And remember, this moves out of the way. And what we want to do is remember this bit is sticking out 1 inch. And what we want to do is we want to move the neck up and down until the bottom of the bit hits that ledge. It's very, very important that you do that. So once you have that, because this, we don't want this to come up to the template itself, because now you're completely off, and we want to make sure we maintain that distance to the nut. Let's take a look at it. So we have the router right here, and we want that bottom of that router to hit that top mark. So we just move this up until, just make sure we line it all up, till it's actually on the bottom of that mark, just like that. And then we'll go ahead and lock it in, and then we're ready to cut. So virtually the router will go around and cut that dovetail. So we have everything set. The neck is in there on the plate, and the next thing we do is go ahead and we put the template in, which is a dovetail template. And if you can look real close, you'll notice that the neck is not touching the bottom of that template. It's very important that you do that, because the whole idea is to keep the bit the same length for both the body and the neck angle jig. At this point, when you're happy with it, we can take the router, and what I suggest is make sure the cord is towards you, and we'll put the router in right here, not here. And because the template has a groove, that as you route, and take your time, on plastic templates, this, if you didn't have it, this would flex, and it actually captures the template guide. So you stick your router in there, and do not start the router until you're secure and it's in the way. When you're done, you turn it on, and then you can move and route out your joint.